Previously on the business.
I'm fascinated by the story of this next company. Managing Director Richard Mukheibir is from Cash Converters South Africa. Richard, first of all, welcome to the business.
Thank you, Ian.
It's a great pleasure to have you here this morning, and thanks for taking the time to pop into our studio. 1984, according to your website, was when Cash Converters launched, and you're now represented in 21 countries around the world with over 700 stores. Who knew? I mean, I see Cash Converters around town, and I'm like, oh, that's a fairly successful local business. I look on your cashconverters.com website, and I'm kind of going, wow.
I think you need to speak to your PR people, and they need to make a little bit of a song and dance about this, because there's a credibility in this. I
think you might be right about that. We're the best kept secret in town, and possibly even around the world. Cash Converters, I suppose, in our industry could be considered very much like the McDonald's of the second-hand goods industry. It started in Perth in Western Australia in 1984, a chap by the name of Brian Cummings. And he effectively took the old second-hand dealing pawnbroker industry and said, let's take this out of the steam-driven age and put it into the supersonic age. Today it's a listed public company on the Sydney Stock Exchange. Cash Converters Southern Africa, the business that I run and the franchisor entity, has its license from Cash Converters International for the Southern African region. We started out here in 1994. In fact, we signed our master license agreement with Cash Converters Australia on the 1st of April 1994.
And you were there day one?
Absolutely, day one. We opened the first store in September of 1994 after I'd resigned from a large corporate. I was in the IT industry, resigned, went down to Perth and trained there for 2 months, opened in Cape Town, in fact in Parow, in 1994. That store today is still operating after almost 20 years in a different locality. We moved it about 3 years ago, but still operating then. So what we did was we started it out. I ran it for the first couple of years as a store operator, so I could get to understand the business model. We then started franchising based out of the Western Cape. That's where our oldest stores are. In fact, our first franchisee is still with us today, almost nearing 20 years, so that tells you something about the longevity of the business model. And then I relocated out of Cape Town, moved here in the late 90s.
Kicking and screaming, no doubt.
Well, the story's quite interesting because many things that I've done in my life has been effectively swimming against the tide.
The tide, yeah.
And I came up here as a 5-year project. And I'm now into, year 14, 15
Once
or
you got
16.
the Josie bug in your blood, you can't go back.
Absolutely. Every now and then my wife and I and the family sit down and think, well, should we go back to Cape Town? And there we do the pros and cons list. And the pros are quite definitely in the Josie column.
So, Richard, I'm really, really interested to find out what made you go into this. I mean, it was quite a leap of faith at the time. You say you walked away from the corporate world. What was it? Did you just have a need to start your own business? What was
I think
the motivation?
I think the family background has something to do with it. I come from a background of my father's a CA by profession, but has always been in small business. My grandfather came from Lebanon in 1897. He literally couldn't speak English when he got off the boat at Durban.
Did he get off at the right port? Because we all have stories in our families where they got off at the wrong port.
We suspect he got off after they threw him off when he ran out of cash. He bought a donkey and ended up wandering around South Africa and started a second-hand dealer or general dealer in a place called Berkeley East in the Eastern Cape. And the family story is around, well, how did he get to Berkeley East from Lebanon? It just sounds really weird. And we think what happened was the donkey died and he couldn't go anywhere else.
Very likely.
So that general dealer is still trading today. I've got the 4th generation of my cousins in there, and so that's kind of part of the story. The other part is we've always wanted to do something myself or start something myself because I'm effectively what I would consider to be an entrepreneur. And one day one of my partners who's with me now and has been with me from day one came to me and said, do you want to become a second-hand dealer? And I was in the IT industry, and clearly there's nobody, I think, listening today or possibly even on the continent who grows up to aspire to be a second-hand dealer.
Well, exactly. That's the fascinating part. So what did you go through? I mean, what process did you go through?
It doesn't happen. Cash Converters International had a marketing video, and we watched this video, and I looked at this and I thought, this was now in 1992, so just before the new South Africa, and I was saying to myself, this would be a great opportunity to get into business. The benefit clearly of franchising is that you have a proven business model. Clearly you have a brand, although at that point in time, nobody knew of cash converters in South Africa, but at least it was the IP the intellectual property we were getting from Cash Converters International. And it was done on a very simple basis. The one being, there are a lot of haves in this country and there are a lot of have-nots. And what Cash Converters does is provide a marketplace for selling the product that the haves no longer need to the haves who are coming up the chain. So that was one of the reasons, and clearly the other reason was, from a franchising point of view, is as a youngster I had no money. So my perception was that if I got into the franchising industry, we could build the business with the money from the franchisees. And at that point in time, we brought Postnet into the country as well. Subsequently sold that and basically focused on the cash converter business. So what I did was I was looking at this video thinking, it sounds like it has the right idea. Let me go and have a look. So I literally got on a plane, flew to Perth one Thursday afternoon, met Brian Cummings, the founder and chairman of Cash Converters International. He took me for a whip around the stores. I got back on a plane on the Sunday, was here by Tuesday, sat around with my partners. I said, guys, we've got to do this. And that's how it happened. 3 months later, we signed the agreement. 6 months later, I was running the store in Parow in Cape Town.
And how many stores are there in South Africa now?
We'll finish the year at just under 70. So round about 10% of the population around the world. The biggest representation of cash converters, in fact, in the UK, about 220 stores, followed by Australia at around about 140.
There's a definite culture when it comes to a store like yours, and I think the numbers speak for themselves. In the UK, you know, people are often will take their clothes, their used clothes, to a charity store and resell it and sell that back into the market. There's a definite mindset with that. South Africans are very disposable. We throw stuff away. You know, we don't think about reselling it. Has that been a bit of an education?
I think to a degree, yes, and also from the perspective that if you think about second-hand dealing, the general philosophy or thought process that South Africans would have is that that's kind of dark and dingy and cluttered and unpleasant and dishonest. Whereas what we've done is we've made it mainstream and put it into a credible retailing environment. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to encourage people to effectively recycle their goods instead of just chucking it away.
Yes.
If you no longer need it, somebody else does. I mean, it's what we're trying to do is provide a convenient facility for people to convert their unwanted goods into cash. So you'll come into what we call our buy shop, sell us the kit, we'll give you cash for it immediately. That transaction shouldn't take longer than 5 to 10 minutes. You're on your way. It's convenient. It's safe. You don't have strangers wandering into your house if you're advertising it in the classifieds or anything like that. And you know that if you come to us, we will buy it, we will have the cash, and you'll be out of there in 10 minutes.
Is there leeway to bargain on that? If I have
Absolutely.
something to sell and I walk
Yes,
into the buy
absolutely.
store?
It's completely a negotiation.
So it's a good training ground for bargaining as well.
Sure.
It is.
Sure.
It's negotiation 101. So
Yeah.
you'll find the consumers clearly will be looking to get as much as they can for
Sure.
it when they're selling it to us. We want to buy it for as little as possible, but understanding that our business is about a long-term relationship with our clientele. So 60 to 65% of the transactions that we do are repeat customers, come to our business on an ongoing basis. And I can still walk into that store in Parow 20 years later and see some of the guys that used to do business with us
Fantastic.
20 years ago.
So Richard, one of the areas of the business that is, I guess, relatively new, not completely new, is loaning cash, that side of the business.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about that.
We launched that into the network in about 2007 when the National Credit Act came into being in June of 2007. And in fact, what it was an enabler. And the rationale behind why we put it in was that our business is about convenient access to short-term cash for our customers. And at that point in time, we effectively had one product. We could only buy from them to give them cash. So what the National Credit Act did was provide us with a framework and a legal framework to get into the business of providing additional products to our consumers. So the first one that we did was rebrand a typical pawn. So instead of the consumer selling us an item, they could use their product to raise cash. So what we have is what we call a cash advance. Consumer comes into our store, wants to borrow. Our average loan is about 650 Rand for a 30-day period of time. He gives us whatever he would traditionally sell as surety. We put it in a storeroom, secured. 30 days later or up to 30 days later, they come back. They pay us the principal, pay us the fees, and take the kit back.
So what does that mean for the kind of debt that you take onto your books then? The fact that you actually have a product there as a sort of a down payment collateral.
It's the security
Yeah.
if the consumer doesn't repay.
And
So-
presumably the loan is given out in proportion to what that
Correct.
item
Yes,
is worth.
Yes, yes.
Let's talk about the setting up of a store, because I know that there'll be people listening to this going, that might be a tasty business opportunity in terms of somebody wanting to start a cash converters in their area. How does it work? What do you need to pay in to get a cash converter store?
Well, it's a franchise model. So effectively what you'd buy from us would be the intellectual property, the training, the right to use the brand, our IT, our IP systems, etc., etc. And it's a traditional, the principle is exactly like any traditional franchise, whether you're buying a Steers or a Wimpy or whatever it might be. The idea being that you lower risk of failure and you ensure that you, to a greater degree, are successful. Our business at hazard guess at this stage of the game would probably be one of the most profitable franchises you can buy into right now.
Can we have one? Can we buy one?
We have three models to answer your question.
How strict are you on your selection?
We're very strict, actually. I'll come to that now. We have three models, a mini, midi, a maxi. So a mini store would be a store with a footprint of less than 250 square meters, a midi from about 250 to 500, and a maxi over 500. And you would need to start with a mini, 1 million rand in cash and the capacity to raise another R1 million. So it's a 2 million rand investment. The midi is a 3 million rand investment and the maxi is 3 million plus. And we require the franchisee to come on board with half of the cash minimum and have the capacity to raise the balance. Really, in effect, equity to provide surety for the banks. And FNB, I know, sponsors this program. They're one of the banks that actually will fund our franchisees as well. So that's the one part. They've got to have the cash. The second part is this business is not for everybody. It's a very, very particular type of individual that does very, very well here. So first of all, we won't sell a franchise to an investor. It's got to be owner-run. In our experience, and this particularly with cash converters and over the other franchises that I've been involved in up to 20 odd years now, an owner-run business will always succeed over a corporate entity. It's sure as the sun will rise tomorrow. So that's the first thing. Second point is it's a trading business. So you need to be, as the Afrikaans say, pretty much of a smous. You need to be keen on negotiation. You need to see the opportunities, and you really need to be excited and vibey about that whole lot. And thirdly, it's a people business. We're in retail. Our stores deal with volumes and volumes of customers on a daily basis. And you've got to be able to relate to people, and that's the crux of it. Those top three are the crux of it. And at the end of the day, it's all about people.
And what kind of time frame does it take to start seeing the break-even point, as you know, from the franchisee's perspective?
If there's any,
if there's a yardstick,
yes.
Yeah.
If there's any sort of, maybe I might refer to it as a handicap of a cash converter business, is that what you're trying to do over here is build assets. So assets associated with the stock that you have, and the assets associated with your debtors book, and that takes a little bit longer than a traditional, let's say, food franchise. So on average, you'd probably break even in a cash converter is about 6 months. Profit-wise and come to a cash flow positive in about a year. So that takes quite a bit of time. But the benefit of that is that once those assets have built, the business's momentum is significant and material. So it goes back to having franchisees that have been with us for almost 20 years, yes. And the momentum is just there. So if you want to kind of give it an analogy, it's something like we're not a Cessna taking off on a runway. We're kind of like a C-130 or one of those big Airbuses you were talking about earlier.
The 380s, yeah.
It takes a little bit of time to get off the ground, but once you're off the ground, the momentum is fantastic.
And outlook for growth, you talked about the number of stores in the country. What are your plans?
We expect that we should be able to double our network over the next 3 to 4 years. And to give you an analogy with that, if you look at a town like Adelaide in South Australia and Australia, they have about 1.2 million people. There are 23 cash converters in that town. In Johannesburg, we have 7, maybe 8 million, maybe in the Greater Gauteng, and we have just under 35. So the opportunity is massive, and we might be well represented, but we're not anywhere close to where we think we should be.
What about online? What about the digital space? I'm talking about brands like is it Vottle? There's a new one that started about junk mail. Those kind of online trading. You mentioned a very pertinent point when you said you don't want someone coming into your home with cash converters. That's kind of protected. Yeah. But that surely must be a threat to your business. People have the opportunity to get online, do it free, and not pay anything sometimes, and sell their stuff there. How's that affected business?
We see it as a massive opportunity. Up until now, our IT infrastructure hasn't been significant enough to take advantage of that type of opportunity. We are in the process of implementing a brand new strategy that will see all of our stores on a centralized database. And the next step in the process over there would be able to provide our consumers with the ability to shop all of our stores centrally from the comfort of their homes, and also do auction as well. So that's in our sites. If you look at the Cash Converter site in the UK, they're heavily into web shopping and the like, and it's proving to be very, very good for them. But I think our timing has, although the potential for competition is quite significant, our timing here, for once, we're not ahead of the curve. We've generally been very far ahead of the curve on many things. But I think now we have enough people on the internet, more of them accessing the internet via mobile than desktop these days. We will have the technology to feed into that type of shopping, and the delivery and fulfillment mechanisms in the country are now really, really good.
And Richard, do you see a spike at Christmas time?
Yes, we do.
Things go up because people just need more cash, and
we see a spike.
Do they bring presents back after Christmas? You probably see a spike after Christmas.
How many pairs of socks do you get?
I just knew I had to ask that.
We see a big spike before Christmas and people selling to us, generating cash, obviously, for their Christmas shopping. And then our biggest retail month is clearly Christmas, because in our retail stores you can get anything you'll find at home: TVs, hi-fis, jewelry, sporting goods, cameras, binoculars, at around about half your price you'd expect to pay for that type of stuff in a new shop. So it really, really is a fantastic opportunity for you to stock up for Christmas. And then, of course, in January it flips completely the other way around. Everybody's probably spent a little bit more than they should have. They've got Christmas presents that they didn't necessarily need. And in fact, it's quite funny, because we can see sometimes the folks don't even unpack the Christmas presents. We've still got the wrapping there, and they bring them to us.
You know what? There's a book in there somewhere.
Must be.
Yeah, or at the very least, a blog linked to your online initiative.
Unwanted Christmas present.
That's brilliant. All right, fantastic. Unfortunately, we are out of time, but I mean, it is just such a fascinating business. It really, really is. Thank you so much for taking the time to come in this morning, Richard, the Managing Director of Cash Converters, Richard Mukheibir. Good luck with Christmas, and I hope that the next time we see you and chat to you, you have double, triple the amount of stores that you have at the moment.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. There you go. What an interesting business. What an interesting business model.
Sheds a whole new light on what goes on behind the scenes.
I'm going to pop into a Cash Converters and just go and have a look in a totally different light one of these days.
The Business on balls.co.za. Brought to you by FNB Business Banking.